So thanks everybody for joining us today, and thanks to our panel for participating today. My name is Mike Morgan. I'm the board chair of APA's DC chapter. And in case you're just learning about APA, American Photographic Artists is a nonprofit trade organization built by photographers for photographers. We're now in our fourth decade, providing business tools and creative inspiration to help photographers at all levels run smarter, more creative, and profitable businesses. So we actually have our National Executive Director, Juliette Wolf-Robin, joining us today. We're gonna let Juliette say a few words.
Hi, welcome. And I just wanted to remind everybody that you have this incredible community locally for your DC chapter, that you are also part of the larger American Photographic Artists group. And be sure to look at apanational.org. We have events going on every single week. All the chapters are producing webinars, educational, inspirational, and you are invited to join any of those, to participate. And a lot of times they're not repeated later, so it's good to check on them and see if they're there. If we do record them and show them, we have a YouTube channel for American Photographic Artists you can find on our site, and link to that and watch them later. And then some of those also on a Vimeo channel for APA members only to watch. But there's a lot of really great content available for people, so please take advantage of it. If you're not already getting the national newsletters, sign up on the homepage site for that, or watch on social media for the information and events and contracts and other things that we have out there. So thank you to the APA DC board for putting this on. Thanks.
So still have some people coming in. Oh, Mike, do you want to say anything else?
Oh, yeah, I got just a couple more things I wanted to add very quickly. So we have a couple of events coming up. April 22nd, we have our women's photography panel on the topic of discrimination in the workplace. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that very important discussion. And then in May, we have our annual portfolio reviews for our professional and leader level members. It's going to be our first time doing it virtually, but it's going to allow us to have art buyers and producers from around the country participating as reviewers. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that. And then you've probably all already met Matthew Rocola. Is going to be our moderator today, and he's also our local chapter director. All right, so go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. So as Mike mentioned, I'm the local director, the director of the local chapter. This is the event where we attempt to cram in a semester's worth, if not a full year's worth, of photography business school into 2 hours. We will not cover everything. It's impossible to get as much depth as required. What we hope to be is essentially just a resource to help you launch and to help you know where to look for other resources. There's a lot of material to cover. Seriously, the first draft of this was about 130 pages. Had to cut it down significantly. And do not try to write down every note. We will provide this to you afterwards. We will provide additional resources. So this is, sit back and enjoy this. Absorb as much as you can, but don't worry if you don't get to everything. So a couple other housekeeping things. One of our board members, Rob Sharit, will be kind of lurking in the chat. If you have any questions, he is there to handle those. We don't know that we'll have a chance to get to individual questions after each section. So your best bet is to interact with Rob. Another reminder, please keep yourself on mute. And oh, I don't know, Mike, if you can mute them. Keep yourself on mute. So this is being recorded, and we don't want people to hear your conversations in perpetuity, which is a term we will get to later. So why are we doing this? One of the things that we recognize is that, unlike, say, like a wedding photographer or a school photographer, most average people don't ever actually see a commercial photographer at work. You know, we sort of work behind the curtains, and we create images that millions of people will see. But in general, people know very little about what we do and how we do it. we also strive, our mission on both the local and the national level is to help photographers succeed. And it's a difficult career to navigate, especially when the map is always turning and the map is always changing. So what we try to do as an organization and with this event is to provide landmarks and places that you recognize and terms that you recognize to help you get your bearings, to help you navigate your career moving forward. So we hope that this is just a basis, a starting point for your own research and your own blood, sweat, and tears to put into your career. But just know that APA as an organization is here for you to help you. So with that, a disclaimer. Everything we're talking about is based on our experience as photographers. We've done a lot of research, but we are not lawyers. We are not accountants, nor can we tell you how much to charge for a shoot. And I can't see everybody, but I know I'm getting a lot of sad faces right now. We will present industry standards. We will present a lot of material, but in the end, take everything with a grain of salt. And being the DC chapter of APA, a lot of this information is intended largely for the DC region. Experiences in other markets may vary. So here's what we're going to cover. The basics of what commercial photography is. And we're going to talk about how businesses are often structured in a legal sense. And also additionally, what every business needs to start off, regardless of whether it's a photography business or otherwise. We're going to talk about the basics of licensing and copyright. And we're going to talk about charging with profitability in mind. Anybody can charge for a photo assignment. It's good to know how to charge in a way that's going to make your business successful in the long run. We're also going to talk about typical line items you might see on an estimate or invoice. And we're going to see examples of 4 different invoices from a wide variety of assignments. And we're going to offer a couple thoughts on branding. And then we have a panel discussion that hopefully will start at about 7 p.m. What we're not going to cover, we cannot go into a lot of legal and accounting nuance. A lot of these things vary state to state. Issues such as sales tax or workers' comp issues vary significantly from state to state. So we won't get into any of the nuance there. We can't tell you how to get clients. If we knew how to get clients, we would be busy shooting right now. There's no magic bullet for that. And that's a whole other discussion that we may or may not have in the future. We can't tell you how much to charge, as I mentioned, and we're not really going to cover any technical aspects of photography. This is about commercial photography as a career, not how to make images with your camera. So at its base, commercial photography is when the photographer's company is hired by a client's company. So, it's true B2B, business to business. It's different than retail, which would be something like family portraiture or weddings, because in those cases, the client it's a private individual, it's a family, it's not another business. It usually does not involve selling a tangible object to a client. So we're not, by and large, we're not interested or we're not involved in selling prints or albums to a client. And instead, what we're doing is we're providing a service. Additionally, I'd say we tend to work more in the 9 to 5 hours during the week. Sometimes it's, I see a look from Rob. Sometimes it's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. But as opposed to, many retail photographers who might work more on weekends. So there's usually 2 factors that will describe a photography assignment or an image. And they're usually categorized by the usage, which is basically how the image will be used or is used. And that might be editorial, advertising, collateral, publicity. And we'll talk about all these terms later. And the genre, which is the subject matter. So whether it's automotive or fashion or product or corporate. And what we'll see is that there's a lot of, these are not neat and clean categories. There are a lot of things that sort of not quite sure what category to put them in, and that's okay. This is not what we do is not a black and white. So some examples of usage. We have collateral, which is when the company basically is using it for their own marketing materials or for materials that they produce themselves in-house. Publicity, which is when you're hired by often a public relations firm to produce images that then they will give to other publications as a means to promote an event or an idea or their client. Editorial, which would be magazines, and on the right here you see a great image by one of our panelists, Stephen Voss, cover of Time magazine, and obviously it's Bernie Sanders. Advertising, and we see advertising imagery everywhere, whether or not we consciously realize it. It's everywhere online in magazines, but also what's called out of home, which are things like billboards and transit ads when you go to a bus station or when you eventually get on the metro again. And there's packaging, pictures on boxes of things you might buy, like cereal boxes or toy boxes, and point of sale or display. So anytime you go into a store, you might be, you'll see images everywhere of people using the product or people sort of just enjoying themselves. These are just examples of usage. There are many different sort of subgroups within this. It's an ad, an example of an advertising, 2 advertising photos for Pepco. And so again, no need to write all this down, but here's just some examples of a few different genres. Event and PR work, and portrait and headshots, and sort of reportage and photojournalism, and architecture and lifestyle and sports and food and product, and there's a whole long list. And one thing that's not included here, which is big in the DC market, is sort of corporate, which can fit into, you could have corporate events or you could have corporate headshots. So there's a lot of, as I mentioned, there's a lot of gray area with these categories. Here, this is a rough idea, and I know I would get some pushback or some disagreement about this, but this is sort of the prevalence of paying work in the DC metropolitan area. So this is a great place to live if you do headshots or if you do PR or event photography in a non-COVID situation. It's an amazing place for photojournalism. Not so much if you want to be a fashion photographer, and not so much if you're interested in photographing cars. So a lot of the experience, that you might find starting your career is really identifying, are you in the right market for what you want to do? And how do you adjust yourself for the market in which you find yourself? So it's just some examples from some of our panelists. It's from Aaron. Examples of headshots and portraits. Some food imagery from Laura Chase. This is an amazing portrait by Stephen Voss. Lifestyle with Marissa. And another reportage, a sort of a photojournalistic image by Stephen Voss. Laura Chase flexing her muscles. Some architecture work with Barry. Another image by from Marissa. Another architectural image from Barry. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Dobie. Do you go by Dobie, Professor Dobie, Dr. Dobie?
And I'll just everyone.
Oh, I was going to give a second to introduce him.
Okay.
Dobie is generally just goes by his last name. Dobie is teaches the business of photography at Montgomery College, so he knows this better than anybody, and has a lot of experience. So he's going to talk about sort of the steps of turning yourself into a business, as well as copyright and licensing. Take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're enjoying the presentation so far. Um, and let's move to the next page. Okay, so you want to be a photographer, you want to be a commercial photographer, and you want to start a business. You want to take probably that hobby because you've gotten a lot of compliments on your images and you're thinking, well, maybe this is something I'd like to do professionally. Well, first off, you need to have a business plan. You need to map out how you're going to set up your business, what type of business you want to pursue. Is it weddings? Is it architectural? You want to understand the market you're going after. And once you have your business plan, a lot of this you can, Google how to do a business plan for photography. Will give you a boilerplate example, and then you can build on that. You want to touch base with your local tax office if you want to, once your business gets to the point where you want to incorporate and set your business so that it's not more of a hobby. It's a definite business where you have articles of incorporation, you're registering your business name with the state, okay? So that they, of course, can charge you taxes, which we all have to pay. In some cases, and once again, you'll need to check with your local business office in the county or state if the type of photography you're doing requires a business license. Some types of photography may not require a business license, but you'll need to check on that. Another important thing is that you want to open up a business checking account. So you want to have your business name on the check as opposed to just your name, but you want to have the name of your business. And with that, of course, that comes up with startup capital. Okay, so once you're going back to having a business plan, you hopefully will have set some money aside to start your business, to open up that bank account. And then the fun part starts from there, because this is the part that none of us really enjoy so much, but we have to do it because this is the paperwork. This is one of the many hats you have to wear. You're not always out taking pictures. You're not always being the creative part, but this is the nuts and bolts that keep your business running. You can either have accounting software, or you can hire a bookkeeper, or in some cases, like what I've done, I've hired an accountant because they know the paperwork, they know the forms. All I need to do is ask them how much I need to pay and where do I sign. I don't want to be bothered with that. If you're good with numbers and that tax thing is, has worked for you and you're able to do it with the software, that's great. But at some point, with the tax laws constantly changing, you may want to find yourself a competent, and I underline that, accountant, CPA. There are people out there that, I've gone through 3 or 4 of them. So you want to find a good person that's a bona fide CPA. The other thing you want to think about as your business begins to make money is like you do on the personal side, you have a savings account. Well, the business needs to have a savings account, so to speak. So you need to think about retirement, because at some point, as we get older, and we all will get older, none of us have gone to the fountain of youth yet or found it, you will need to have money set aside. Next page, please. So business types. The most popular, probably starting out for a lot of you, is a sole proprietorship. Taxes are part of your own tax returns. They are passed through a Schedule C. You file taxes with your Social Security number or an employer identification number. and you and your business are legally intertwined. Now, at some point, you may want to separate your personal from the business, and you may want to talk with your accountant and consider an LLC or a single member limited liability company, similar to a sole proprietorship, but you're separating yourself from the business. So if someone were to unfortunately sue you, they could only come after the business, the assets of the business, not your home or anything personal. Once again, you would use the EIN rather than your social security number, and taxes are filed on a Schedule C. The other one, the third choice is an S Corp, where you become an employee of your company. You pay yourself through a payroll at regular intervals. And at the end of the year, you issue yourself a W-2 stating the earnings that you've made. Next slide. Another important part of the business is to have business insurance, just like you may have automotive insurance, life insurance. Business property insurance is going to cover your equipment if it's damaged, excuse me, if it's, you drop a camera, you drop a lens, or for instance, after a shoot, you and your assistant go have lunch, your car is full of the equipment, you come back, some or all of the equipment is gone. So you have insurance to cover that. The other part of your insurance policy will be general liability. It covers if someone else is hurt or property damage while on a shoot. Certificate of insurance is a document that some of your clients may require to prove that you are insured. Even if you want to rent a studio, the studio manager may require you to provide a certificate of insurance so that if there's any damage at the studio, that your insurance will cover it. Professional liability, errors and omissions, covers you from a lawsuit in the event that the client disagrees on whether the assignment was completed as expected or if the assignment could not be completed. So hopefully, you won't have that issue, but you want to be covered. Electronic data loss covers loss of data such as images. A hard drive gets damaged. Just a quick little scenario. Back in the film days, I had a friend, wedding photographer. He lost an entire wedding shoot when he sent the film via one of the courier services, national or international courier services, to the lab. They lost the film. Next slide. Other insurance that may be required, workman compensation. If any of your crew get injured on the shoot, that will cover them being there any hospitalization or hospital costs. And of course, you need to have healthcare insurance for yourself because you want to be in tip-top shape when a client calls for you to do a project. You don't want to, you want to be able to not have to dip into personal savings to cover any medical expenses you may have. And then the other thing is long-term disability is another consideration. Should you get injured and not be able to work for a period of time or for, God forbid, the rest of your career. Next page. Savings and retirement. As a lot of you may know, or some of you may not know, our work comes and goes. It ebbs and flows. We may have a busy month, and then the next month we're dead. So you want to have a retirement plan. A lot of our clients have it. We should have it too, for that rainy day, where you want, you may want to go sit on a beach later in life and enjoy your time. You want to consult a financial planner about individual retirement account, IRA, or similar retirement plans. There are a variety of those types of plans out there. Just as we have savings accounts, your business should have a savings account as well. Next page. Taxes, Schedule C. The taxes on the profit and loss statement of your business. What you've charged for shoots minus expenses, your crew, marketing, equipment, etc., equals your income. It's all that's left over after expenses. That is your income. You may also be responsible for the following, and you would need to check with your local municipality based on the type of photography that you're doing. So you may have to charge your clients sales tax. And in some cases with that, you would need to get, if your client is tax exempt, they would need to provide a tax exempt letter for you to keep on file. You'll probably also have to pay self-employment tax, in which your accountant can give you more information on that, or your tax preparer. Personal property tax in Montgomery County, Maryland, Alexandria, Virginia, we have this. It's, I refer to it as business personal property. So when you buy that new camera, new computer, office chair, desk, printer, all of that at some point is either depreciated, but you're making money off of it in the area in which you live, the municipality in which you live. And of course, they want their cut. So that is depreciated. Your accountant will help you with that, but you pay a fee every year for your equipment. Other state and local federal taxes may apply as well. And also with the personal property tax, there is a fee to file the form. So that's another thing you have to be aware of. From your clients in which you've done more than $600 of business with them, they're going to send you a 1099 form in which that states the compensation that they paid you for that year. That's what they're letting the IRS know, that they paid you X amount. And you will do the same thing for your crew. If you paid any of your crew, your makeup stylists, your assistants, your digital tech, more than $600 that particular year. Next page. We have some images of the different types of work. Again, interiors, portraiture. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us show up and get to work. Next page. Copyright and licensing. Okay, this is also very important. Copyright. Of course, when you click the shutter, you own that image. But you want to also understand that what we do, the images that we create for our clients, we are licensing those images to our clients, basically giving them permission to use that image or images a specific way for a specific amount of time, purpose, content, and geographical area. To fully enforce our copyright, images need to be registered with the United States Copyright Office, generally within 3 months of creation. And the Copyright Office in 2018 changed the one of the regulations or submission rules, where before you could submit unlimited number of images for a particular feed. Now they've reduced that to you can submit 750 images per fee. I can't remember what the fee is. I think it's $55 or $60, but it's no longer an unlimited amount of images. But it's best to copyright your images and get those into the office. That would be published and unpublished images. Exceptions to this rule would be if you're an employee in which the employer owns the copyright to the images, or if you sign a may work for a hire agreement that's sometimes hidden in a contract, or you transfer the copyright after the image is made. Next page. Licensing, why does it matter? The more prominent the intended use of the image, the more value it has to the client. So the higher the licensing worth. So the licensing is very important to understand because like the other page stated, you are allowing that client to use that image for a certain time period, location, and market area. And you need to understand the worth of the image so that you can price it accordingly. The client is using that image to make money for themselves. The creator should be able to earn money proportionate to that value. Licensing allows you to make money with the image after the fact, either by re-upping the license with the original client or relicensing it to another client. And that has that can be, you know, extra money that you can make that year or that month if another client approaches you seeing one of your other images and wants to use it for another use outside the initial use, if your client no longer has need for it, the original client. When you use a license model, your client is only paying for the usage for that for the uses that they need. Okay, so you want to have all that spelled out. You want to ask all those questions. How do they want to use the image? Next page. Here, a picture of an apple on a menu of a local diner has less value than a picture of an apple on a McDonald's ad on a New York City billboard. Once again, the price of placement is higher. That is a higher market value in New York than maybe in Richmond, Virginia. It will be seen by more people and potentially earn more revenue for the client. So you want to understand the placement, the market, so that you can be compensated properly for the licensing of that image. Next page. How you determine licensing fees. No single definitive or universal accepted source. Triangulate through various resources such as PhotoQuote, which is a software that through craddocksoftware.com that allows you to have a jumping off point for assignment fees, stock photography, and I use it a lot. It's been very helpful. Online research such as Wonderful Machines, pricing and negotiation blog post, estimating and bidding consultant. The other thing, if you're a member of APA, is you call one of your fellow photographers and ask them. So that's another value in being a member of the organization. Next page. Parts of a license, media use, how the image will be used for, you know, is it magazine, is it billboard, the term, how long, the scope, the number of images, and exclusivity. Next slide. General categories. Okay, collateral, produced by the clients themselves. That includes brochures, flyers, annual reports, company magazines. Publicity, client or client's client provides the images to a third party editorial publisher at no cost. Common in PR, Hollywood movie stills. Advertising, the client is paying someone else to display those images, magazines, billboard, online, transit. And by transit, that could be, you know, metro, bus size, things like that. Editorial, the client's a publishing company, and the image will be used to illustrate an article as opposed to an advertisement in the publication. So it could be, editorial could also be like a trade publication. Website versus online versus social media, best to clarify on a case by case. You always want to ask the question, how will my images be used that I'm providing or producing for you. Next page. Common usage time frame, used in various combinations with placement. 1 year time use, common in advertising and editorial. 1 year often being from delivery of the image to the first use. 2, 3, 5 year, depending on the needs of the client. Each additional year often being a percentage of the first year. For example, the first year is $1,000. The second year might be $500. The third year, $250. Okay, every situation will vary. So it depends on your market, and it depends on the client. Perpetuity, forever. There's that word again that Matt mentioned earlier. Geographic areas, worldwide. Okay, the whole blue marble. North America, similarly South America, Europe, Asia, etc. Regional, New England, Mid-Atlantic, South, Southwest, North, Midwest, all of those. Local is usually right around your area, you know, New York City, DC metropolitan area, your immediate area. Next page. Exclusivity, whether or not anyone else can use the images. A period of time. A magazine usually will want exclusivity for 3 months from first publication. A lot of times in my experience, you know, depending on who I photograph, that image will have additional value to some other clients, but I have to wait, you know, until the magazine says it's okay, or that time period for their exclusivity has expired. Within the industry, for example, pharmaceutical client, so their competitors cannot use the same image. Greater exclusivity generally will raise the value, less exclusivity will reduce it. Next page. This is text that you may want to have in your contract or estimate. The following non-transferable, non-exclusive license is granted to client upon full payment of final invoice. Print collateral use for 6 selected images for a period of 3 years, beginning on March 1st, 2021. Of course, your date will be different, but as an example. Next slide. If in doubt, spell it out. If in doubt, ask somebody how to spell it out if you're not sure. Always ask, seek other people in your organization, in APA, other photographers that have more experience. Next page. And
So I'm going to take back over at this point. Give Dobie a break. Thank you. Okay. Hello. So we're going to talk about building an estimate. And here's the punchline. There's no magic formula. We all wish there was an easy way to, you know, in a fast way to build it that everybody would agree on and everybody would love, but there is no magic formula. So there's factors when you're pricing an assignment, and each one will contribute to the total of the estimate in different degrees. So we already talked about licensing and usage. That's obviously a big factor. And in a bit, we'll just cover very, very briefly the expenses, and as we look at some estimates and invoices. So the big sort of chunk in the middle is the creative fee. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. So it might include, for example, what the market will bear. We all think our images are worth gold, but maybe they're worth silver to a certain client if that's all they can afford, or in a certain, market, certain area of the country. We'll talk a lot about the cost of doing business, but also in there's also time. A job that takes 2 days is going to cost more than a job that takes 1 day. There's also elements of creativity. Are you being hired to take a picture of a widget, or are you being hired to take a picture of a widget in a very, very creative way, with intricate lighting and very specific, in a very specific style? There's also difficulty. You can take a picture of a widget, but if they need a macro photograph of a widget, that's harder to do, and that's worth more. Experience comes into play sometimes. That experience that, you know, if you've been there before, and you know, it can sometimes be seen as you've got a greater chance of achieving success, purely because you've made all the you know, you've stepped in all the holes yourself and you know where they are. And then, so talking about cost of doing businesses, there are a lot of sort of calculators that will sort of tell you how you should figure this out. The main difference is whether or not it includes your salary in there. So there are some calculators that say, oh, enter how much you want to make a year, to which everybody's answer is more. So other calculators sort of say that it should be a percentage of how much of your total, you know, how much of the money that's brought in from the jobs. I don't think there is any single way that works all the time, but the important thing is just to keep in mind what your cost of doing business is. You may have something that's examples of what items are needed to run your business that have to be covered when you bill a client. And if you don't know how to properly figure out how to cover your costs, you're going to be losing money. So everything from computers and cameras and, you know, your internet connection, and, you know, if you have studio rent, you know, your website, you know, all these little things add up. Joby mentioned insurance. You know, for me, that's $1,500, I think, a year. Personal property tax, between the filing fee of $300 a year and the actual personal property tax, you know, that's $1,000, I think. And so these things add up. And if you don't understand how much your costs are, you don't know if you're charging an amount that's sustainable to run your business. So the big question is, where does the money go? So imagine, for example, you're doing a shoot with no expenses. Say you've already have your equipment, you're rolling into someone's backyard, you're not using an assistant. If you charge $1,000, the temptation is to think that you just made $1,000. And the one thing that I think everybody needs to learn to repeat in their head is, my business is charging your business X amount of money. Because from that, you are only getting a maybe 30%, maybe 40%, maybe as high as 50% of what that amount is, depending on your cost of doing business. So it's tempting, you know, as Joby mentioned, you have to learn to think of yourself as a business, and your photography is a business. And like any business, you don't get paid the entirety of what your company charges. So for example, this is an example. This will vary depending on your own situation. If you shoot that $1,000 job, that a good chunk of it's going to go to taxes. A good chunk of it is going to pay for the equipment that you use, and in your insurance and your licensing, and hopefully retirement and savings. And it leaves a small gray area, you know, and 350 is an approximation of what you actually get at the end of the day. So an example, just to move on. So an example of some of those fees and expenses. So any given estimate will have at least some of these components. So you'll have a creative fee or licensing fee. You may have scouting or pre-production. And those are usually charged as fees. Then you also have expenses, which are your crew, your assistants, your stylists, you know, everyone who's working on the production. It may include catering and craft services. It's parking and travel and studio and all these other things that add up to what sometimes are some pretty big numbers. And so an example would be, if you had a $10,000 production, you know, you might think, oh, I'm making $10,000. The temptation is to say, oh, I'm making $10,000 today. But you, again, have to think of it as your business charging the client's business, and you're only getting a portion of that pie. So for example, a $10,000 production, you might have to pay some of that budget to location expenses and parking and meals. and a lot goes to your assistants and your stylists, and another goes to, equipment rental or post-production or retouching. So you're only getting this gray portion. That's the creative fee. That's what's going to you, and we'll see examples of this. And from this gray wedge, you then take that's what you get your take-home fee from. So again, just sort of realizing the larger ecosystem, that it's the temptation there is there to get excited, but the money quickly goes away. An example of $100,000 production, it's the same thing. The pie slices might be a little bit different. Maybe you have talent, maybe you have an RV, maybe it's traveling, so you've got hotel expenses, travel expenses. But again, the photographer's fee often stays, a small percentage of the overall budget. And from that from their photographer's fee or that creative fee, you're paying yourself a portion of that as well. So even with a $100,000 production, the creative fee might be $30,000, but in the end, the photographer only is really putting maybe $10,000 in their pocket. When putting together estimates, there's a sort of big ongoing conversation about whether you should combine the creative or licensing fee, or if you should separate them. I have heard convincing arguments on both sides. A lot of photographers will say combining them makes it easier for the client to understand it, but separating them can make it a little bit easier to negotiate, when they want to change the terms. I don't think there's a single way that works well in all situations. Again, this is another example where you just have to, in some cases, go on a case-by-case basis. This is a whole other event, just talking about setting this up. So let's look at some invoices quickly. We got 4 examples. The first one is sort of a basic headshots for a company. And this is the sort of job that in DC is quite common. So for this, what I like about this estimate, and you see it says assignment confirmation and estimate. And it basically gives all the information. It's a bit more condensed than some other ones we'll look at, but I think that's a perfectly appropriate for this kind of job. And it lists out all the basic things that should be there. It describes where, when, and how the images will be made up here on the top. It describes what the images will look like, and that's essentially just communicating with the client that it's what we had talked about on the phone or over email. Very importantly, it tells how many images will be delivered. And it describes turnaround time. And down here on the bottom, we have usage. So it says how the company can and cannot use that. And covers important things like basically saying that this is an estimate based on what we discussed. And it always gives a photographer an out. You always want to give yourself an out. If the client then says, oh, we have everybody here, can we do a group shot? If you have what the deliverables are spelled out, then they understand that they're going to have to pay more for that. Instead of just I always say my least favorite words on any assignment is, while you're here, can't you just ... So having a good estimate to cover what exactly you say you're going to do and what and eliminate what you're not going to do is a very important thing. There's also payment terms and a cancellation fee. And you can't see it, but down below I zoomed in on this to make it legible, but there is actually a signature line there, which is very important. Always get your client to sign it. And that's an acknowledgement that they understand and that you guys are on the same page. For fees and expenses, it's pretty basic with this, but there's the creative fee for the 13 people, including an assistant. This is very, very, very common. I think all the assignments we're looking at have this, that there is some fee that describes what is done to the images after they're made. And it can be very tempting to not include that to make it easy, but sort of this is constantly a reminder to the client of how much is getting done to an image outside of what they see. And it also is another way that, we talk about the creative fee on the top. This is another fee that, especially in a case like this, goes to the photographer. On larger assignments, it might go to someone else. It might go to a staff or an external retoucher. But this is another sort of revenue stream that's coming in outside of the creative fee. And here he also has, producing an online gallery, archiving, FTP display. It's always handy to remind the clients of how much work you're putting into it and what they're getting for their money. So this is from Stephen Voss. So this is interesting. This is an editorial job with a client, with a regular client of his with which he has an overarching agreement. So if you look at this invoice or this estimate, excuse me, you'll see that there is no licensing terms on this, because every assignment of this sort that he does for this company is governed by this other agreement. So what that does is it's already established a blanket policy for the usage and the rights, but it also makes assigning jobs faster and easier. So if you are a photo editor and you need to have someone get to a location tomorrow to do a shoot, it saves the negotiating and the back and forth, and allows you to make a shoot happen faster. And this is a lot more common in editorial clients, I found. It also means you're also on a preferred vendor status, which means if you have this arrangement already done with this client, they're going to call you before they're going to call someone else that they don't, that they haven't used before or don't have this sort of arrangement with. It's another example here, and this is we can really start looking at some line items. So this is a cover shoot for sort of a local magazine, and you can see how much work goes into this. So you've got the photographer's fee, and then you have the fees broken out separately. I don't know if this is the case with this photographer, but some clients sort of want you to do that. They insist that they're broken out. And it helps them, in some cases, compare apples to apples when they're looking at multiple photographers. But you can see under here, there's a whole line item, under the crew. Now you have a digital capture person. You have the kit and the technician, and you've got a stylist, and the stylist has pre-production days and post-production days. And you have a prop stylist. These are the things that end up making, this is what really goes on behind the scenes that most people don't see, is it really takes a team to make images. We mentioned the liability. It's very common in a lot of instances to add a liability line item to help defray the cost. So if they say you need an insurance certificate, then it's common to charge a client back for it. This includes a studio rental for the day, props that need to get purchased. And these are estimates, but props purchased, props rented. Sets and expendables, these are things that don't, that you're assuming you can't get returned. So a lot of times backgrounds, certain materials you assume are just going to get trashed at the end of the day. They're things purchased, but they have no value afterwards. Parking, in this case, mileage. And as you can see, the total, or what I was saying about the cut, the pie chart, the gray area is about, if you look eyeballing it, this is about a third, somewhere around 30 to 40% of what the total is. So that's sort of in line with how a lot of productions work. Now we're going to talk about a big one. Here's a 5-day advertising shoot. It's an international store chain. 48 final images, licensed for advertising in perpetuity. And the shoot was in Chicago, and the photographer is a DC photographer. So again, looking at this estimate, we've got outline of when the shoot's going to happen or where it's going to happen, with as much information as possible. the deliverables, what they're getting, and a breakdown of what it looks like. And oops, excuse me. And sorry, let me go back to that. And this is very important. Client agency to provide and pay for talent, in this case, employees and store location. In general, if you're doing a bigger job, you don't want to pay for the talent yourself, because the talent has their own, if it's coming from an agency, they've got their own restrictions for the usage. And if the client misuses those images, you want the client to be responsible for that, not for you don't want to be stuck in the middle of that. And this also lists, the caveat that the images have to be made when the store is closed. So again, you have the licensing up here. Here's the total of the fees, of the creative fees. And then down here you have, the breakdown of the post-production work. And again, the total, and eyeballing this again, it's still the 34,500 is still about a third of the total budget. And remember, this 34,500, that's what the photographer's business makes. That's not what the photographer made on it himself. That's not what goes in the photographer's pocket. This we're seeing a little bit more of the contract. You can see a definitions clause on the back. Oops. And I'm really showing this, pointing out the payment, when the payment is due. A reminder that the photographer owns a copyright of the images. A section about cancellations, weather, and postponements. These are all pretty standard elements in a what's called terms and conditions. And you can see the client signature, along with the receipt of 50% advance of total project estimate. This varies. Some clients don't want to pay a certain percent. Some will only pay expenses. Some will only want to pay 30%. This is the variables, and then some banking information. So quickly, branding yourself. You work so hard to make images, elegant images for your clients or for someone else. Sometimes it's hard to remember to do it for yourself. But you have to remember, you are your own brand. Every touch point, whether it's how you dress when you're on the Zoom call, whether it's how good your website looks. These are all things that add up to come together to form your brand. If you want to charge $1 million, you got to look like you're worth $1 million. So we don't have time to dive into this deeply, but a couple quick things. So your website. Commonly, it makes a lot of sense. You want your website to be yourname.com versus some, fancy schmancy photography.com. And the reason is, if you meet a client somewhere and they remember your name, you need to make it as easy as possible for them to find you. So either you have to nail your SEO, or, the easiest way is to make your name, your website URL, some version of your name. For mine personally, it's Ricola.com, but I also own MatthewRicola.com. Again, just making it that much easier for people to find me. Always be aware of similarly named websites or domain names and the possible confusion it may cause, especially if you have a common last name. And also just be aware of sort of .coms versus .nets and all the different endings you can get now. You need to be careful that you don't have the same sort of online presence or similar online website to a competitor in your local area. Email is still the main means of communicating with clients. So take the time. You can do this through Google to make sure your email is something, hi, hello, your name @yourwebsite.com. This looks much more professional than approaching your client with a Gmail account. And these are all the little things that add up and make you look professional and make you look like you have your act together. And a brief, relevant signature line. Visual identity. A clean, flexible logo that can be used in many different contexts, whether it's going to be on a business card or letterhead or your website. This should represent your brand or style. So I love Laura Chase's because looking at her logo, that looks like her. You know, if you know Laura Chase, you know that fits her. Stephen Voss, what I love about his is I always think of Stephen as a very thoughtful photographer. And this, to me, his logo really communicates that. Marissa's has a lot of energy to it that I really like. And it's that little lightning bolt. I may be biased because we spent a couple of weeks talking about that lightning bolt and which one I liked better. Come up with versions, you know, for your address, contact information, etc. Quick last thing about phone etiquette. This has come up in conversations with a couple of other photographers in the past couple months. There's a lot of options now. I know it's less common for people to actually talk on the phone. So there's some, you know, various ideas that do you need one phone number, one for your personal and one for your business? You can do that through Google Voice or a couple of other options. Should you have a WhatsApp or a Skype, you know, information listed? I think with any of these, only put in lines of communication if you are going to answer them. So I think Skype is great, but if you're not sort of up on it, if you've let it lapse, you know, you're going to potentially miss calls or miss assignments. Voicemail, set it up on your phone. Sort of anecdotally, I've called assistants to see if they can help me out on a shoot last minute, and there is no voicemail, and I go with someone else right away. It's very important. If you don't know, check. And just a simple, you know, hi, this is your name. I can't get to the phone. You know, please leave a message, is very, very important. When you answer the phone, sound like you want a job, be optimistic. And the trick is to actually smile when you answer the phone. And it does, if you know, try it sometime when you're in the shower. When you smile when you're on the phone, your voice changes and it makes a huge difference. In general, and this should be pretty obvious, don't call a client too far outside of business hours. I think in a lot of cases, especially with agencies, you can stretch that a little bit on the later side. Don't text a client unless you already have an established relationship. You know, it's especially if it's a person's personal phone. A lot of people really like to keep that separation between work and their personal lives. And this is also sort of strategic. Occasionally a client's going to might call you on the phone. And sometimes they're doing that because they want to say something and they don't want to put it into writing. So one of the things you have to remember is if you work for an employer and you're using their email address, the employer owns that email. So as a general rule, don't put something in an email to a client that you don't want to get around. Because if that person leaves that company, someone else may be looking at that email. So sometimes just be aware, sometimes if a client calls to talk on the phone, it's because they want something essentially off the record. Okay, woo, the panel. So I'm very happy to welcome, we've got a great panel of photographers who have a lot of experience in this and other areas as well, other markets. So they're going to talk a little bit about what they do. I will introduce them very, very quickly and then let them introduce themselves. First up, and I'm going to make sure I can pin everybody to the top here. We have Laura Chase. Laura is a editorial commercial photographer specializing in food and food culture. Mike, can you share people to the top? Pin them to the top?
Possibly. I'm working on that.
Okay, I'm doing it now. And next we have Aaron, who is a commercial corporate shooter. He actually does quite a wide range of work in the area. And his clients include NBC, the Kennedy Center Honors, Scholastic Magazine, PBS, LinkedIn, Sierra Club, L'Oreal, and the National Academy of Sciences. We have Marissa, who is originally from Southern California. She's still getting used to the weather here. Portrait and lifestyle photographer. And her clients include the real estate company Compass, Keller Williams, Sotheby's, and also the Washingtonian, Boston University, and various magazines and companies around the area. Barry Harley is a photographer, he's architectural and hospitality photographer, who works for a lot of hotels, both domestically and abroad. And Stephen Voss is a editorial photographer who does a lot of work for companies such as CNN, Politico, NPR, Time Magazine, etc. So I'm going to make sure you're all pinned to the top. Who am I missing here? So Laura Chase, do you want to start introducing yourself? Or do you have any?
Yes, I can do that. That's fine. Like Matthew said, I'm Laura Chase DeFormany, but he is incorrect that I am not Laura. I am Laura Chase.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I know you were doing so well. And then I heard Laura and I was like, oh, so close. But anyway, Laura Chase is my whole first name. My bread and butter is the Washington Post food section. And through that, I gain other restaurant clients and do that kind of commercial work for them. So they'll have me come in when there's a new dish that they're adding to the menu, or for example, a restaurant I do a lot of work for called Shook in DC. They've just started packaging their vegan hamburgers. And so I did the packaging for them, which will hopefully be going in grocery stores and things soon. They've set up a point of sale on their website. And so I've had to negotiate a contract recently with them about packaging. So I do mostly editorial, but I am on the road to doing a lot more commercial. Is that what you wanted to know? Did I do okay?
Perfect. That was awesome. Stephen, I'm taking you in order of people on my screen.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Voss. I am an editorial photographer here in Washington, DC, and I've been here since about 2005. Most of my work is for news magazines and newspapers. I do a lot for places like the Wall Street Journal, AARP, and Politico. Most of my work tends to be politically focused in one way or the other, and I kind of do two things. I'm, a photojournalist. That's how I got my start, but I also do portrait photography. And, that mix is kind of how I run my business here in DC. And I'm really glad to be here. It's nice to see you all.
So we just run for it, go for it right after. Well, I'm Barry Harley. I'm a architectural photographer here in DC. I shoot hotels, buildings mostly, just because they don't talk back. No, I'm kidding. They're fun. So I've been doing that for about 8 years, and so I'm one of the vendors for Marriott hotels, and then I shoot for a couple of the bigger architectural firms here in DC. And I'm originally from a small island called Jamaica, which no one has heard of.
Marissa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. So Matthew kind of gave you a quick rundown, but I am a portrait and lifestyle photographer here in Washington, DC. I've been shooting for a little over 10 years now. I specialize in working with non-professional talent, so people that are not models. Most of my work is client direct, so I'm working with a company's marketing or creative director to execute a campaign. Matthew also mentioned earlier that one of my clients is Compass Real Estate Brokerage. So that's a great example of one of those clients where I am working directly with their creative director on their various campaigns.
Aaron?
So I prepared a couple things to say. I was under the impression we should talk for like 5 minutes, so just cut me off because everybody was much more
That's
brief.
what I said. Everybody else copped out.
So just feel free to cut me off. But so I'm Aaron Klamage. I've been taking pictures my whole life. I got my first camera when I was 10, but professionally for about 16 years. And I actually studied computer science, which is very different, and I hated it. And I always had this influence. My father is a very award-winning documentary filmmaker. And one day, I was in school, or not in school, I worked briefly in computer science, and I decided I just wanted to do what I'd always wanted to do. And I picked all my favorite photographers and just started, found their numbers, started calling them, spoke to a bunch of people. Some said, you can't make money doing this, keep it as a hobby. I spoke to Stan Grossfeld with the Boston Globe, who was really great and said, that's a load of something and you can make really good money as long as you have some skill and talent and you're good at the business side. And then I spoke to a gentleman, Ira Block, who is a geographic photographer who happened to be teaching a workshop in Maine. So I got a bus ticket, train ticket, whatever it took to get there, and did a story on a blueberry farmer. And they had, it was a documentary photography class. And they picked one person in the class to be published in the Bangor Metro magazine. So that was my first publication and how I got started, and went from there. I'm really a generalist. I shoot pretty much everything, anything with people, but I'm sort of, I guess, talking about sort of the business corporate kind of photography side, which can mean all sorts of things, obviously, headshots and, annual reports and things like that, but could be, one of my favorite jobs was photographing behind the scenes for the Kennedy Center Honors for the production company by the gentleman, George Stevens Jr., who started it, who created the Kennedy Center Honors. And so like rehearsals behind the scenes and things like that. So it can mean, that can mean a lot of different things. My typical clients are like, obviously corporations like, as mentioned, LinkedIn, T-Mobile, law firms, think tanks. I have a lot of, special interest groups, some broadcasters. We had been asked about equipment, so I'll just say, and Matt, feel free to cut me off.
That's okay.
But I'll just say the best advice I ever received was get what you need, as you need it, and so I started out with very little, a camera and a few lenses. If you shoot PR, which I didn't mention, I do a lot of events in PR too. If you shoot PR, having, the sort of trinity of, wide, medium and long zoom lenses helps. But, I didn't buy lights right away. I borrowed gear from people and, gradually got stuff as I needed it. And what I enjoy about what I do is the variety. I feel like I'm doing something different every day. Sometimes, I don't really, most of the time, unless it's something editorial, I'm not working with an art director, so I kind of do what I want to do. And PR and events, that part of it kind of has a bad rap, gets looked down by a lot of people, but I actually really enjoy it. It's, to some extent, it's journalistic. You can capture interesting things. And I'll just share one quick thing. When I had a regular think tank client that became very formulaic, always shooting the same thing in the same room. Like the Kennedy Center Honors is easy to do something interesting, but when it's talking heads, it's hard. And I shot it the same way. I started shooting it the same way all the time. And then there was a Getty photographer. It was like Mattis, I think, was the speaker. And so they had a lot of press. And I was watching this other person, pump up their stuff on a laptop after, and saw like this cool shot from behind using like a, Fox and CNN, cameras kind of framing the shot. And it was just a reminder, you can always work the scene. You can always do more interesting things. Typical week pre-COVID. To be honest, there really is no typical, but with a lot of stuff, sometimes I'm working all day, every day. If there's events, sometimes there's stuff you have to get out, like from media, but sometimes I have nothing. But 2019, I looked at May, which was a really, I know is usually busy, and I had 33 jobs. So sometimes you're working a lot. I think before COVID, I was probably doing too much because I was afraid to turn down work, didn't want clients to go shopping. And, so it helps to have a trusted network of people you can outsource stuff to, and, and definitely prioritize other things and make sure you leave time for editing and administration and family. It's not to brag, I'm pretty slow now. You know, a lot of my sector has been hit pretty hard, and I know people that are busy, you know, so, but it's just a reminder, you always have to, there are ups and downs, and you always have to be, you know, do the marketing part, which I'm not that great at because I've been lucky, you know, but it's, you know, but when you have a slow period, you realize you should have been marketing before. So it is definitely important. I think that's pretty much it. So sorry I went on longer than everybody else.
So, you know, panels work best when it turns into a conversation. So I'm going to sort of work on, first of all, I have to say the spread you had in Metro, Bangor Metro, that's wasn't quite my hometown newspaper, but I think I might have gone to kindergarten with your assigning editor.
It's possible.
So I've been talking with Marissa, you know, in the past, she's mentioned that marketing is sort of a constant thing that you need to do. What, and again, let's think about it in non-COVID times, but how, when you were starting out, how did you find your first clients? So if someone's starting on the industry now, and anybody can jump in on this, how do you make those inroads? All you, Marissa.
All me? All right, that's good. How do you make those inroads? Let's see. First starting out, I actually started an editorial. So I went to local publications and I had in-person meetings with editors, brought a physical portfolio, and said, hey, do you need a photographer? I am here. This is what I can do. Kind of like put me in, coach. And from there, I did get work and I started building jobs. And then some of the people that I was photographing were, you know, businesses, CEOs, people that were like, hey, we actually need more photography for our business. Can you do X, Y, and Z? And that's really how I got started. So yeah, I would say start local. I mean, now you can definitely do, you know, social media, you know, marketing, email marketing. But I would say start local and try to have some sort of personal touch to it, whether it's you know, a phone call or, you know, a direct email to somebody.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I agree. I mean, the way I got started, so I went to school, much like I think, was it Stephen or Aaron said, I didn't go to school for photography. I actually went for drawing and painting, and realized through my experiences that I love taking pictures and telling stories. And so I just was sort of a cocky, you know, college student who had taken some cool pictures at Study Abroad and sent them to Bethesda magazine, and they started hiring me. And I was like, oh, cool, maybe I'm not that bad. So, you know, you miss all the 100% of the shots you don't take. So just put your stuff out there and don't worry about rejection. That would be my big advice. I see Barry has his hand raised. What do you want to say, Barry?
My hand was raised before you started.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
I'm fine. It's okay. We're friends here. So if I put my hand up, it doesn't matter. You just said.
So polite of you. I'm so sorry.
You just said, don't worry about it. You have to have thick skin for a photographer. So
Yeah.
That's nothing. No, go ahead, finish, and then I'll talk after.
No, I think I'm done.
Did Barry get to introduce himself? I don't think he.
Did I not? Did I miss you?
No, you didn't. I just
we
I
heard Barry.
was so quick and brief that
Okay, I
went by
was
so fast.
So Barry, what were you going to say?
So now I was going to say that to get in your first gig or job is, for me, I was working in an architectural firm and I realized that's what I wanted to do. So I would shoot some of their projects. And then I went to a friend of mine and said, I can do this for you. That's what I did. I went to the warm leads first. So we're going to talking in sales terms in a way, because my background stemmed from, I was a graphic designer to a car salesman to a CAD drafter. And in all of those experiences, you pick something up. And in the drafting world, you know how to visualize things parallelly and vanishing horizontal lines and all that kind of thing. And then in the graphic design, you see things graphically. And then the sales is what helped me to get my first gig, because I didn't know how to prospect people. I didn't know how to close people. And I didn't understand what a closing ratio was. And what that means, it takes it out of the personal and puts everything in terms of numbers. And that way you don't get hurt when you get rejection, because it's just a numbers game. If the closing ratio is something similar or this way, if you talk to 10 people and 2 people now become your clients, then to get 4 people, you just need to talk to 40 or 20. You just need to run at the numbers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you look at the closing ratio, the best closing ratios are about 25%. So when somebody says no, it's not a big deal. 25% of the time, that's where you're going to land a gig anyway. And even if you're not, and maybe the photographer will kill me for this, even if you're not good, you're going to land 25% of them anyway. So as Laura said, don't worry about it. In year 4 of you taking photographs, you're going to look back at year 1 and go by and think, oh my God, what did I photograph? That was so horrible. And that's all of us. So don't worry about half of it, just start doing.
To piggyback on what you said, it's kind of what I was saying earlier, is separating yourself from a business a little bit. So when you said not taking it personally, I think it's important to, we are all doing our art to in various degrees, and it's easy to get sort of identify so closely with it. But somehow we need to maintain some objectivity, both with our subjects and with ourselves. So Stephen, do you, you're one of the examples of people who you're photographing scenes where you're not necessarily trying to make it look good. Everybody else is trying to make the food look good or make the subject look professional. I mean, you are in many cases documenting what you see. Any thoughts on that, or how you're able to create that separation?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the separation is really important, and you don't take it personally. When you're being rejected, you are not being rejected. Maybe your photos are, and that's fine. And having that rejection is really crucial. And so to get back to the original question, I think doing putting yourself in the position of the photo editor is really important. Like, why would they take a risk on you? So my first work was as a photojournalist, and that work came because I did my own stories. When I was living in Portland, before I was making my living as a photographer, when I was just doing freelance web design, I sought out stories that I thought were interesting. I shot them and then I shared them. And that was my way of showing photo editors, like, hey, I can do this work. I'm reliable. You can count on me. I'm able to do things that perhaps other people can't do. And I have a point of view. And that has kind of been, always the thing that carried me, is I want to have a partnership with the people I work with. And, I'm fortunate as an editorial photographer where it's rarely the people who I'm photographing it who are hiring me, right? So I have that separation where, like, I don't have to please them. So it sort of in some ways kind of opens things up for me where, I'm really thinking about, like, who are the people reading this story? What are they going to learn about these subjects? And how can I, in this sort of editorial position, and I mean editorial in almost like the New York Times columnist editorial, right? I mean, it's not objective. We're all kind of in these subjective worlds. So, like, how do I bring my judgment and my assessment of a person in a scene to the forefront and try to communicate something through my photos? And I want to be hired for my perspective. I want people to hire me because they're interested in the way I look at things, and that's what I've tried to build a career on, is that perspective, and that as a way to separate myself from other photographers, and to I frankly it's what I find interesting. Interpreting scenes, interpreting people, understanding the news cycle, and understanding where, like, a particular person or a particular event fits into that, and what is this photograph going to look like today when it's a magazine? And if someone happens to run across it in 10 years, what is it going to look like then? Is it going to still hold up? So those are, some of the things I think about and how I sort of develop, who I am and how I put myself out there.
It sounds like what you're describing is expertise. And I think that's one of the things we're really selling as photographers is our own expertise.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we need to be trusted, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to be trusted, especially when you're as a beginner, like when you're first getting into this business. It is hard because, you're developing your voice, you're developing your photography. And, one thing, like, I tell people is like the photography, like, you just got to work at it. It's like, it's putting in the work. There's no magical steps, but the other stuff, like the soft skills, are really important too. Like, do you get back to an editor who reaches out really quickly? Do you respond quickly? Are you kind? Are you polite? Are you the kind of person they would want to like know and be friendly with? Are there misspellings in your emails? Like, as a journalist, like stuff like that is terrible. Like, your captions need to be like on point. So, there's like a whole myriad of skills that you need to develop beyond just being the person who can take the picture. And I think those are equally as important. And frankly, like, you see people who have the great business skills and maybe not the great photography skills can succeed in this business because there's such a premium on running a good business and being trusted in what you do.
I think I wanted to Stephen sort of echoed what was going through my head. Was I think I didn't go to school for photography. I went to school for computer animation. That's what I have my degree in. But I think sometimes, and I have a big ongoing tug of war with higher education in terms of, I think they flip-flop some of the things that will make you successful. The business side of it will make you successful. And I think we focus on the art and crafting and all of this, but most of the time as a commercial photographer, you're going to be either writing estimates, talking to clients, trying to find leads. If you really boil down the time you spend actually doing the photograph as opposed to marketing and the business side, it's almost 70-30 of what you do.
I want to say one piece of advice that my professor gave me in college, because I found photojournalism really in my last semester of college and then stayed in extra semesters to take advanced photojournalism. And my professor, I said, I'm going to get a master's in photojournalism because I feel like I missed out on so much. And he said, don't do it. He said, if you're going to get a master's in anything, get a master's in business. And I couldn't agree more. Now that I'm 12 years deep, wish I had that master's in business.
So Marissa, what is it? What do you think that you bring to the table that clients really respond to?
Well, I think actually, a little bit of what Barry just touched on was that business part. Like, I mean, everyone's stressing it. I can't stress it enough. Like, having, even, you don't have to get a master's in business, but even taking just like a business course or like a workshop.
Are you suggesting that whole 1 hour thing that I sped through was not enough?
I think it was an excellent foundation. It was very thorough. No, but I think that is definitely something that you're talking with clients and interacting with them so much that you really do have to remember that this is a business and that the client is coming to you as a photographer, but there's a product, right, that you're creating. And so, yeah, I think, part of why clients, I think, are there's two reasons, I think, why clients are drawn to me. One, I think there is a little bit of that organizational side on with the business, and I think I'm a fairly good communicator with my clients. And then also on set, I think there's you have to have, I think, a really easygoing way about you on set sometimes. And I think that you also need to be a strong leader. I think that sometimes I am an introvert at heart. I really don't like having to be an extrovert, but I force myself to when I'm on set because I know that's what I need to do to, to really end up getting the best imagery. So I think it's a combination of things, but I can't, there's the two pieces of advice that when people ask me like, oh, what's your advice? I want to be a photographer. And so the two pieces is, one is, this is a business, treat it like one. And the second, if you have an opportunity to assist a photographer, do it. You will learn so much from assisting. So those are my two pieces of advice.
So Aaron, you are sort of, again, in non-COVID times, you are regularly in sort of corporate offices, both with PR and events and the portrait work. How do you communicate to the client? How do you get them settled? What is it about you that you think they react to that builds that trust?
It's always hard to sit there and respond to, well, why did they pick you? Why are you, I think, I'll say a couple of things. I think that one thing is, so there's some truth, there's a lot of truth to the whole, everybody's talking about, being good at the business side. And we all, there are people that, you have to have some talent and skill, of course. There are people that are really successful because they're good at the business part of it. I think another really important skill is the people skill, and just really sort of setting people at ease and being comfortable with them. So I'll tell a quick story. This is a business kind of situation, but it's kind of a unique one. So years back, Barbara Streisand came to town, and I was working with some group that I can't even remember what they were called now, but basically got a job through that, covering her. And it was really boring grip and grin stuff. It was her, on the hill. And she's very particular about how she's photographed, has to be photographed from a certain side, and just really wants to feel comfortable with the photographer. And I don't think, to be honest, I think anybody could have taken these photos I took, obviously you have to have, some skill, but they weren't really anything great other than, I made her feel comfortable, and that probably came across in it. And because of that, every time she came back to DC, for various different things, she called me. So over the years, I have photographed Barbara Streisand a bunch of times. She has this Women's Heart Health Alliance thing. And it's always these boring photos. There's talking about the licensing side. She wants full control over it. So there's a full buyout. So it's pretty decent money for these boring photos. But, and it's a really cool experience to sort of be around somebody like that and experience that. But it's, the part of it that, I'm not trying to just say, I'm, talk down the photography side, but I think the part of it that made her keep calling me was the personal part, making her feel comfortable. So, I think that is a big part of it, and probably with any area of photography that deals with people, but, definitely in the corporate part and, with, headshots and things like that, a lot of the times, the experience the person walks away with, obviously you really care about getting great images, but that's what, makes them call you back.
I'll sort of jump in for a second. I used to do a lot of corporate work in Boston, and what I realized was that I was hired to make whoever hired me look good. And if you can make your client look, if you can make the actual, not the client as in the larger company, if you can make the person who actually got on the phone and hired you look good, they will call you back. Because in many situations, they don't want to hear from their boss or their boss's boss that the photographer messed up. So there's a lot of, to I think echo what you're saying, trust. You build the trust. The hardest job you ever do for a client is the first one, because after that, you have got a relationship and trust built up.
Can I just close out one other thing about business that I want to say? Because when I was an up and coming photographer, I went to the AS&P seminars of business. I read the books, and I have to say, frankly, it all bored me silly. And the key for me, the little breakthrough I had was that I really like making a living taking photos. And the pathway to that is getting good at the business stuff. So that's like the necessary evil in order for me to spend a career taking photos. And that was how I sort of like backdoored my way into, okay, this stuff actually is important, even if it's like, you know, I didn't get into this business to like send invoices or like register copyright. I really like taking pictures. So like, if you like kind of keep your eye on the ball and like say, this is really what I want to do with a career, with like, you know, a livelihood, this is the way to do it. Like it's, if you don't maintain that stuff, the rest is going to fall out and you're not going to get to do this thing you love anymore. So that's always how I see it, because I am, you know, I don't love doing it, but I absolutely know I have to do it in order to do the stuff I really love.
And I just to piggyback on something you just said, when you were talking about, you know, I think this whole panel, this sort of thing, you know, the conversation that you introduced with is very instructive and very useful. But I have a you know, close group of photographer friends, and I still call them about estimates. You know, I still, so, you know, I think, you know, as far as the business side, having people you trust and rely on that you can consult, you know, to get advice, because you're always going to need that advice, helps too.
Absolutely. Aaron, that's like a great point. Having a creative community is so important. And it is just to, you know, to get someone's feedback on, you know, on something, or even just be like, hey, I'm in a rut. I need to go, like, help me get out of this rut. Let's go do something, you know, creative, even if it's like a walk with your camera. So yeah, having a creative community is huge.
And I'll say I have called or texted Marissa in a panic more than once about a job or needing to be talked off a ledge.
I always enjoy those phone calls.
So kind of building off that idea of community, what other, outside of photography, are there other interests? I know, Stephen, I know you're a big reader. What other sort of passions in the arts sort of motivate you and keep you going? Anything come to mind?
I mean, I found like at some point in my photography career, I never went to school. It's so funny. Aaron said computer science. I was also a computer science major. That's what I went to school for. And so that, I guess that's a funny commonality. But yeah, I realized, like, for me, like, the part of the education I missed was not the photojournalism really, or the portraiture. It was sort of like a little bit of the fine arts background. It was like how, you know, like, a lot has been figured out in the art world over the last, 500 years of stuff. So it's like, how have people dealt with the problems that I'm dealing with now, the creative problems, the development problems? And I think, photography is still such a new medium, right? It was like invented in the 1830s, somewhere around there. So like, there's so much that's instructive that's outside of this small world. And I think, like, I have developed more as a photographer through looking at how other artists see the world and how other people operate in a creative world. I do a weekly phone call with a bunch of other creatives. There's a painter, there's a musician, and every Wednesday at 1 we have this Zoom call and we just like chat about our careers. And it's like a really instructive thing. And it's like, I love seeing how different people work in different mediums that are artistic and creative. And I think that's, for me at least, that was a really valuable push to like kind of stop being in the narrow world of photography and try to sort of broaden the world I'm looking at and what I'm taking inspiration and influence from.
Earlier on in my career, I did have what we would call artist lunch. I actually own that URL, artist lunch. I used to, in Miami Beach, we used to meet on Lincoln Road. A couple of very famous illustrators, a writer, an architectural photographer. I was the graphic designer back then in the group. And we used to all get together. And right now I have a group on Fridays. We get together. There are musicians, a fashion designer, a painter, illustrator, an architect. And we just get on that. We started that sort of group therapy session, as it were, when COVID hit. So we said, we can't get out, so let's just all jump on this call together. And we started and we realized there's so much commonality. And then what happens from those meetings is the musicians inspire me to go and pick up back my guitar and start playing, or we inspire them to go grab their cameras and start shooting or painting, and then as Stephen said, you start looking at these other mediums, and there's other ways of expression, and you realize that you can pull some of that into what you do. And that just makes the photography even that more fuller an experience.
Building on that, photography's, the technology is changing. Everything from not just a move where all the clients seem to want video, or many clients seem to want video, but there's also, computer animation, CGI, that's becoming more and more human, more and more lifelike. AI is sort of creeping in too. What I hear is discussions about sort of other arts and sort of a melding of ideas. Where do you see photography? I mean, is photography going to exist as we know it in 10 years? Will it be a blend of illustration? Looking at some of those other art forms and how they inform each other. Any fortune tellers, Aaron?
Rumors of photography's demise have been greatly exaggerated. So, I don't, I think forever people have been saying that newspapers are firing, photographers, stocks taking over, people are taking pictures with their phones. I think what remains constant is there's always going to be a way, I think there's always going to be people creating images professionally, and there's always going to be a way to survive, financially doing it. You just have to constantly be willing to, change. And, because you may be an art director's favorite right now, you may have a contact at this business, the art director or that contact may leave, a pandemic may hit, so, things change, and, the people that are flexible and able to adjust, whether it's maybe doing video or doing that's obviously not photography, but just doing different things, I think it's always gonna, I don't think it's going anywhere.
I can't agree with that more because, I think that for me personally anyway, my style of photography has been such an evolution, starting as a photojournalist at newspapers, then becoming a wedding photographer, and now focused in food. And I would say for the first 9 years of my career, I was 100% a natural light photographer. And then necessity beckoned that I become a studio photographer because I photograph in dark restaurants all the time. And I can't just show up to places and expect there to be gorgeous north light window when I'm photographing, burgers and fries in a cellar when the story is about the best bar food.
You only photograph restaurants on the south side of the street.
Exactly. But so I'd say that you will know when it's time to learn something new. It'll be very clear to you when it's time to grow and push and buy more gear and do all of those things. So yeah. Does anybody else relate to that? Like you've just had to grow, you've sort of been forced into it?
I came to DC as a photojournalist, like same with you, Laura Chase. Like that was my first love, and it's still my first love. But I got started getting hired for portraits, and it was the same thing for me. It was like natural light portraits for a long time, and then I finally cobbled together this little light kit, and just suddenly realized like I had opened up a whole new world. Like there were brand new opportunities that were available to me that I did not have before. And that was especially in DC, which is just like lousy with photojournalists, that being someone who can do like a stylized portrait would set me apart a little bit.
That's so interesting because I love your lighting, and I can't imagine so many of your portraits without that lighting. Huh.
There's a reason you don't see any of those. They're hidden away on a hard drive.
I had a similar, well, as Laura Chase said, I'm shooting interiors. Cameras do not like interiors. They're built to shoot out in the natural light and sun. So once you take them inside, you have to find a way to control it. Joe McNally blew my mind in an afternoon, and that was it. He showed me how to use a speed light off the camera. And once he pulled it off the camera, my world just exploded. My wife will tell you I became like a mad scientist, like lighting everything and putting the flash everywhere, and then realizing, as Laura, you realize, okay, now I have to grow, because I realized I can put something stationary, actually light it 50 million times, and then, hey, I can composite it. And people are going to say, hey, why are you compositing? I said, but Da Vinci did it. Do you think those guys look that way? They didn't look that way. He was getting light from all over the place and then making it look like what he saw in his head. So I'm doing the same thing with my flash. This is what I see in my head. The camera can't exactly do that, so I am making it do that. So at some point you realize your vision, as you said, you grow, your vision of what you want as a photographer will change, or now you have the skills, or you will go and find the skills to make it look exactly how your brain perceives it.
Anybody else want to jump on that? So I want to ask some people have touched on this already. Sort of, this is the infamous question. It's a piece of advice to your younger self. And let's think outside of business. Let's not mention business school. What would you tell your younger self? Laura Chase.
Oh, well, I'm kind of echoing what I already said, but I would tell myself not to be scared of studio lighting, of artificial lighting, that light is light and you can learn to control it, and you are the master of the light, and it's not out of your realm, your capacity to learn how to light anything at all. You can do it.
Marissa.
I think it's almost like the flip maybe of Laura Chase. I feel like I got so bogged down in the technical that I forgot to have fun and be creative with it. So I think just remember to have fun, and that this is, if you start getting overwhelmed with the technical too, just go back to a camera and like just a reflector. Like you don't even need to and then start slowly building back in, your other lighting, and get friends to be your models and do test shoots and play around with it. But yeah, don't forget to have fun.
I agree with that 100%. I learned on 4x5 and big studio strobe lights, and there came a point where you just felt like it was so much stuff, and I felt more at home with a Nikon at the time and a 50mm lens.
Oh yes, the nifty 50.
Yep.
Did they still call it that?
Oh, the kids, probably not.
So funny you say that, Matthew, because yesterday I did a test shoot for a promo that I'm shooting in April, and I had Jamel come and be my lighting assistant. He's another APA board member, and and I just bought this third light so that I could do even more things with it. And I was sending these screen grabs from my Lightroom tether to my rep, and she was like, no, we're not there yet. And then she was like, do it like how you did this picture. And it was a one light picture, bare bulb, nothing, like F8, like just this not complicated picture. And I showed her, I did my set the way I was going to shoot the promo with one light, and she was like, that's it, that's who you are, like go back to basics. Totally.
What's the question? What would I tell my younger self?
What's advice to your younger self?
I'm trying to remember. What do I tell?
Or you can just answer anything. We're kind of going off script at this point.
Yeah, my younger self, I would have said, I wish I had started doing this earlier. And what I wasn't told that I could make a living with my camera. And that's one of the big things I try to tell, especially from countries in the first world. You have those sensibilities. In the third world, it wasn't even on the table. to pick up a camera, to provide for your family doing that. And one actually famous photographer said to me once when I said, I think I'd like to do some more, see how good I can get at being a photographer in my area. And this is what he said to me: you do not want to be the best photographer. And I looked at him like, okay, you can say that. What are you saying? He says, no, those guys have no life.
Mhm.
You want to have a life. So the best photographers are constantly busy and are juggling this. So you're looking for if you're, and that's what I would tell my younger self as well. Try and find that balance. For me, photography is about spending time with my family. How can I do that? Yes, I love photography, but one of the big perks is you get to spend quality time with your family that in other professions, they are just not going to have that opportunity. So take advantage of those, as a camera person would say, the in-between moments.
I think I love what Barry said. I would echo that. So my advice to my younger self would be, number one is max out your Roth IRA every year. Really important.
Yeah.
And secondly, like I honestly, I wish I'd taken myself more seriously early on. Like I wish I had, this is kind of a weird thing to say, but I wish I had worked harder at doing what I did. I wish I had made more mistakes. I wish I had not let my style be defined by who was hiring me, and that my path was not charted by who called me that day or who hired me, and that I spent more time developing the path and making the work that I wanted to be hired for. When you're starting out, you take everything. You take those terrible jobs. My first work was for the weekly paper in Portland, Oregon, and I got paid $50 an image, and that was it. And if it was on the cover, it was Maggie, and if it was on the cover, it was 200. And we have a mutual friend in Portland. But it was that could have, I wish I had done more to use that as like a launching pad to really push the work that I wanted to do, instead of just being like making that the all-consuming, like this is the career, is doing this work. And I think what I've tried to do, as I'm in sort of a mid-career place now, is take more control of charting the path I want to take, rather than letting that be something that is is controlled by the people who are hiring me. And I think that's really important, especially, in the editorial world. I don't do as much commercial work, so I'm not in that world as much, but the editorial world is, in some ways it's imploding, in some ways it's, there's a lot of opportunity, but it's different. And, you need to be really nimble. You need to keep moving. And I think it's okay to make mistakes. I think it's okay to try new things, even if you don't show them to anyone. But I think it's not okay to sit still. And I think that's the thing I would have told myself is early on, you really you need to keep moving. I don't like the word hustle. I'm not a hustle person, but I like the idea of evolving and evolving creatively and, in your career, in your work.
One of the common piece of advice for new photographers is shoot the work that you want to be hired to do. And I think that's important, is what's passionate for you, what really makes you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. I started my career as a corporate photographer. And one day I woke up and I realized I had 3 suits, 4 sport coats, 18 ties, and all of my shoes had creases on the top because of just from doing events. And I realized this isn't what I became a photographer to do. Yeah, sort of, I love that idea of sort of being true to yourself.
Can I just piggyback on what I think everybody is sort of saying the same thing, but but I kind of feel the same way, and I think that part of what I would tell myself is don't let it's sort of like the have fun part, and I think I sent you Matt, I sent you a quote 2 minutes before the meeting started.
Oh.
I thought of one which was have fun and good things will come, but I think that it's easy. We're all talking about the business side and how important it is, and it is, but it's easy to get bogged down in that and let that, take over. And, I think to some extent, I've done that a bit in my career and just kind of, doing well, getting jobs, but not really shooting the things I wanted to shoot, all the time. And so, I think if, I were talking to my younger self, I would say, always shoot something for yourself, even on, a job where it's not necessarily, the job that, do something creative, shoot something for yourself, and, just, have fun with it, and don't just be governed by the business side of it.
Some of the stuff that I've shot that people know me for is kind of weird. It's not the stuff that I make money on. I have a ton of stuff that happened over the last couple of years that had nothing to do with architectural photography, but when I was presented with the opportunity, I wanted to do it so bad. It was this nonprofit called from Miami. They needed somebody to go with them to the Congo, and all I heard was Africa. I didn't hear anything else they said. I just said, yeah, I'm ready. Because I had this dream in my head of shooting in Africa. And I didn't, all I said to them, as long as I'm not, it doesn't cost me, I'm with you. And then it turned out I had two exhibitions from that shoot, one in Miami, one in a museum in the Congo. Then I don't think anybody has written an article about any of the architectural stuff I've ever done, but I don't know how many TV, CBS did a piece on it. It was written up in this magazine. But so sometimes you do have to take a risk. And as you're saying, Aaron, is sometimes just have fun and do something sometimes that is out of your wheelhouse. And it usually turns out to benefit you.
So to play on that, I think this will be the last question. We're sort of at the end of our time, but what's everybody's dream assignment? Forget the money, just, if you could get paid a fair amount to do something. Barry?
Mine is easy. I want to do a multiple content hotel and lifestyle shoot. I want it to be just one. It could be multiple clients or one client, and they want me to shoot all around the world for them, one brand, hotel and lifestyle.
Is that all?
That's all.
Marissa?
I would say something similar to Barry, like a national ad campaign like American Express, where they send me all over the world to photograph people. So yeah, that would be a lot of fun. So a job that would entail sending me all over the world.
I think everybody's a little COVID stir crazy right now.
Yeah, exactly.
How about you, Laura Chase?
I don't, my goals aren't quite as grand as everybody else's, but I would like to photograph a farm to table cookbook and tell the whole story so that I get to include what really first drew me to food photography was actually agriculture photography and where the food comes from. But I'm really drawn to Paris lifestyle cookbooks, which is a very specific niche. But if I could do a cookbook in Paris, that would be amazing.
Stephen?
A few years ago, I got sort of obsessed with bonsai trees, and I spent like a year and a half photographing them and made it into a book. And I want to continue that work, and there are some places I want to visit, and I'm actually in the process of like developing a story proposal for that. So if that comes through, that would be the dream job.
Aaron?
So when I started out, I wanted to be a photojournalist, and I don't really have, and it's the storytelling aspect growing up with a documentary filmmaker father. And I think I take that approach in everything I do anyway, but I don't have I've kids and a family. I don't really want to travel the world right now or go into war zones, but anything where there's a story involved or anything, where, I don't know, that aspect of it. I don't have one specific thing, but if I could do that all the time, that's what I would do.
Well, thank you, everybody. I think Do you want to take everybody's time? Do you have any questions from the chat? Anybody has? Mike, have you found any chats that we could cover?
Well, I think there was really only one or two questions in the chat, and they were addressed. Okay, we have one from Sarah.
Sarah, you can just go off mute if you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured that might be easier. I have a question for everyone in terms of photography school. So I did not get a photography degree either. And then I wouldn't consider myself a commercial photographer, and I'm trying to kind of go more in that direction. And I've been talking to Micah, and they kind of told me that there is a possibility of coming in as a graduate student based on previous work experience, which would be great. I guess my question is, would you recommend, because I do feel like I want to fill in those gaps that I feel like I have as an artist, but would you recommend getting the sort of, photography degree that's leaning more towards the arts, like the MFA, or would you recommend the business side of that? Because it sounds like everybody was saying, I wish I would have gotten more the business training. And I used to do business development for cybersecurity companies. So I do have a lot of past sales experience and stuff like that. I feel like the artistic side of my photography, I feel like is where I'm not as strong. So I just wonder what everybody might recommend in terms of that.
So to echo something that Marissa said before, I think like finding photographers you love and assisting for them is like such a valuable education. It's like real world. You're out there, you're working with someone who is making a living doing this. And I think there's such an education to be had from just seeing how people work, how they run their business and that sort of thing. And this is spoken as someone who did not go to school for photography, so I can't speak to that at all. But I would say, from my perspective, I wish I'd assisted more early on, because I think that's where a lot of the education can come.
I was actually going to say something really similar. I think I probably, if you poll the panel or, professional photographers in general, you're probably not going to have a huge portion that went to photography school, and that's not a good thing, to go, I think there's a million different, this is one career where there's a million different paths. And, I did the assisting route, and I think that, that for me, that was the best way to learn, and I think you learn a lot that way. And so I couldn't, I think probably learn a lot in photography school too. So, there's different paths. I couldn't tell which would be better, but I think that there is no one answer. There's no, you just have to find a way. And, I'll just say one other thing, not to take over. I just want to say one thing. Somebody said to me once when I was starting out, that, you basically figure out where you are, figure out where you want to be, and draw like a direct line to that point, and just figure out how to get there. And I know that's kind of vague, but my my point is, this is like the one career where there is not one path, so yeah.
The one thing I'll say about that is I don't think, especially with an MFA, I don't think you need an MFA to be a great photographer. The one thing it will do, however, if you have any interest in teaching, it's a huge difference. You do not get paid nearly as much. In photography, an MFA is a terminal degree. So that if you have any interest in teaching at all, you will need that to make any sort of living wage as a teacher. But the other thing too is, what everybody else has said is there's a lot of, you can, I think as Barry said, and as Steven said, like, you can go to an art gallery and you can learn about art. I find inspiration in I love posters. I love poster art, which is not at all like my photography, but that's where I sort of get interested. So, if you're trying to develop your art, developing your art's a little bit different, I think, than developing your skills. You develop your skills to realize your art, but your art comes from what inspires you. I don't know if anybody's really inspired by pro photo lights as much as they're inspired by the lighting that you can create with it.
I think there's two ways to think about school, and it's how you learn. If you learn by being taught by someone that way, that's the way you go, or do you learn from apprenticeship? Here in the US, their focus is on the collegiate type education. If you check the European style, they have a apprenticeship program that will drive you if you learn that way. I think they are now discovering that there are two paths to being like a CEO. You either can go to school or you can become an apprenticeship, and they both are just as valid, but it just depends on how you learn.
Sarah, I will tell you
Absolutely.
that I was actually enrolled in the Masters of Illustration program at SCAD. And I realized for that particular program that it really was focusing on preparing you to be a business person in the illustration world. And I actually ended up leaving the program because as moms put things, she said, I think you just want art class. And that's true. I just wanted art class. But so if you do go into a master's program, make sure it's giving you what you want. I wanted art class, and it was trying to teach me how to be a business person in the field of illustration, which in hindsight, I'm sure probably could have rolled over into photography really nicely. But I realized my heart wasn't in it because all I wanted to do was just do the homework assignments and draw pictures.
I think my issue right now is I am in the sort of, first 2 years of like more of a studio type business. And I find myself being quite bored and not shooting as much. And 70% of it is running a business. And I think about it and I'm like, I thought I was going to, be shooting 100% of the time. And I did for a little while as a freelancer, but then now it's very different. And so I think I'm just missing that aspect of it quite a bit.
In my opinion, that means you're doing something right. Because like what Steven said before, it's at the beginning of your career when you're doing $50 assignments 6 days a week. Like that's not what seasoned people do. I shoot 1 or 2 assignments a week. And then the rest are desk days, which focus on marketing and learning QuickBooks and emailing people and preparing promos and doing all these things. So to me, I think it's great that you're shooting 25%. That sounds like a good number to me.
I just remember when I was doing business development that I thought I would never have to do sales again, and now I'm right back there. And I'm like,
I know it's cruel irony, isn't it?
Yes.
I think just want to say one other thing following up on, I think it was what Stephen said, is that, no one's, at least I don't think any photo job they're ever going to ask you for your resume and, look at where you went to school. So, it's what you need to learn in the best way that you can learn it, and, figure that out.
I think that's a good place to end. Thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to thank our panelists for opening up their souls to us. We will do a little bit of work on this. This recording will be posted in a couple of days. We'll do a little bit of editing and tidying up. We will also have this deck available in a couple of days. We will add some resources to it. So things, about where you can learn photography, lots of things about estimating and setting up businesses and that sort of thing. And hopefully some inspirational items in there as well. So with that, Mike, anything else you want to send us away with?
No, I want to say also thank you to everyone who joined us. Thanks to our panelists for giving their time. Thank you, Matt and Rob and Dobie for putting together this amazing presentation. And we really appreciate it and hope to see you all at our future events.